December 31st, 1983. It was supposed to be New Year's Eve, but instead, Nigeria woke up to the sound of military boats marching through the streets of Lagos. The Second Republic was over, but how did Africa's most populous nation go from celebrating democracy in 1979 to cheering for military rule just 4 years later? The answer lies in one of the most dramatic political collapses in African history. Picture this. October 1979, Nigeria had just transitioned from military rule to civilian democracy under President Shagari. The country was flush with oil money and hopes was high. Nigeria called itself the giant of Africa, but giants can fall hard, and fall it did in spectacular fashion. Between 1979 and 1983, Nigeria became a masterclass in how not to run a democracy. What happened next will shock the world and leave lasting scars on African politics. First, let's talk about the money, or rather, how spectacularly they wasted it. President Shagari's government turned public funds into their personal piggy bank. We're talking about a period where Nigeria appointed ministers like they were handing out candy at Halloween. Every state had commissioners, permanent secretaries, and legislative houses with at least 60 representatives each. The Senate and House of Representatives became known as the highest paid legislators in the world. Yes, you heard that right, the world. Instead of governing, they spent their time deciding on their own salaries and planning foreign trips while ordinary Nigerians suffered. The numbers are staggering. When the military took over, they found cash everywhere. 80,000 naira in Alhaji Shehu Musa's house, 204,000 in ex-Benue Governor Apa Aku's residence, 42,000 naira at Vice President Alex Ekwuemi's place, and a whopping 1 million naira at ex-Imo State Governor Samuel Mbakwe's home. The most shocking, 3.4 million naira in cash at ex-Kano Governor Alhaji Sakin Zumo's house in Kano. But the money was just the beginning. These politicians treated Nigeria's constitution like a suggestion rather than the supreme law. The most outrageous example, President Shagari illegally deported Shugaba, the Speaker of Borno State House of Assembly. There's literally no section in the Nigeria's constitution that allows a president to deport a fellow citizen. Shugaba had to go to court to return to his own country, and he won. This was governance with lawlessness as a democratic mask. If you thought the 1983 election was about democracy, think again. They were more like the rigging Olympics, and everyone was competing for gold. The presidential, gubernatorial, and legislative elections were characterized by ballot box stuffing, underage voting, and outright falsification of results. The chaos was worse in Ondo State, where the violence was so extreme that entire families of politicians were wiped out. Hundreds of houses were burned, and even Fedeco state headquarters went up in flames. The Electoral Commission, Fedeco, was so corrupt and incompetent that courts had to order fresh elections multiple times. Chief Obafemi Awolowo, the leader of the Unity Party of Nigeria, said he witnessed the worst rigging ever in the history of elections in Nigeria. Even Nnamdi Azikiwe wrote directly to the president, calling his victory inglorious and advising him to resign because the results were falsified. While politicians were swimming in stolen money, ordinary Nigerians were drowning in poverty. Unemployment reached embarrassing and unacceptable proportions, according to the announcer of the 1983 coup and future military leader Sani Abacha. The government even banned new employment in 1981. Imagine that. No jobs, no hope, no future. The result? A crime wave that swept across Nigeria. Robbery and thuggery we know today became the norm as desperate youth turned to violence. In a country where graduates couldn't find work, where salaries were unpaid for months, where basic services collapsed, the coup wasn't just inevitable, it was welcomed. By December 1983, Nigeria was a powder keg waiting to explode. States like Bendel owed 1.1 billion in debts. Workers weren't being paid. Healthcare and education services were collapsing. The politicians had turned democracy into a feeding frenzy while the nation starved. When Major General Muhammadu Buhari announced a military takeover by December 31st, 1983, millions of Nigerians didn't mourn democracy. They celebrated its end. The Nigeria Observer captured the mood perfectly. The initial general euphoria exhibited by a great number of Nigerians showed the coup was very welcome. Here is the most tragic part of the story. Nigeria learned nothing. The politicians of the Third and Fourth Republics repeated the same mistakes. The 2003 elections were bloody. The 2007 elections were declared do or die by President Obasanjo himself. And the 2011, 15, and 19 post-election violence killed many people and displaced a lot. General Babangida cancelled the January 12, 1993 elections, plunging Nigeria into even deeper crisis. The same electoral malpractices, the same corruption, the same violence. It was like watching the same movie over and over again. The fall of Nigeria's Second Republic wasn't just a political failure. It was a human tragedy that set the template for a decade of democratic dysfunction in Africa's most populous country. When we study this period, we are not just learning history, we are understanding why democracy remains fragile across the continent of Africa. The lesson: democracy isn't just about elections. It's about accountability, respect for rule of law, and putting the people before the personal profit. Nigeria's Second Republic forgot that lesson, and the price was paid in blood, tears, and lost decades of progress.